99% of the people that are watching this video are legally excluded from his mission. I'm sure that even you have realized that even the name that we use to refer to Messiah carries a bit of controversy with it. In the Greek New Testament, the word was Iesous, and for the disciples who were following him, they referred to him as Yeshua. So you will hear me in this conversation refer both to Jesus and to Yeshua. I'm referring to the same person, and we are examining the statement that he only came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Most people think that Matthew chapter 15, verse 24 is an isolated comment, but it's not. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus is sending out his disciples, and he gives them a specific search and rescue order. Listen to this. Matthew chapter 10, verse 5. It says, "These 12 Jesus sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans don't enter, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." When an investigator comes across a specific phrase and it's repeated more than once, it's not an accident. It's actually a code. Jesus could have just said Israel, but he chose lost sheep. The question that we have to answer is why? Well, the answer starts to emerge in John chapter 10. This is where Jesus famously talks about, I am the good shepherd. But then he drops this bombshell. He says, other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. He's talking to the religious leaders. He's talking to the self-appointed shepherds of Israel. We'll come back to that. But think about this logic. You don't seek something that never belonged to you. You search for something that has been taken, something that has been misplaced, i.e., lost. Jesus wasn't involved in a recruitment drive for strangers. It was a recovery mission for a specific group of people who were already his, but they'd been scattered across the nations. Now, before we move to Exhibit C, I want to hear your perspective. If the lost sheep were already his, as the evidence suggests, where do you think they were hiding? Let me know in the comments. I'm monitoring the thread for the best insights. But look at the verbs that Jesus uses: seek, save, recover. In Matthew 9, he looks at the crowd and he sees sheep without a shepherd. These are all familiar stories. But understand, this isn't just a metaphor for being sad or lonely. In the ancient world, the loss of sheep was a legal and economic disaster. They were a shepherding people. It was a portion of the inheritance that had gone missing. The evidence is pointing to a shocking conclusion, and this is it. Jesus didn't come to build a new organization or establish a new religion called Christianity. He came to find a destroyed nation and put the pieces back together. Now we're halfway through this file. This evidence is getting denser. If you're finding that this investigation is helpful, then I want you to hit the like button. Let's get back to the legal search. At this point in the investigation, we've established a pattern. The good shepherd, the my sheep, the other sheep. But now we have to look at the nature of the search itself. Jesus never describes his mission as a recruitment drive. He describes it as a recovery operation. Think about that. You don't search for something that never belonged to you. You search for something that was lost. Now, in the Greek text of Luke 19, when Jesus says he came to seek and save that which was lost, he uses the word apollyami. And that word means to be rendered useless, to be destroyed. In a legal sense, it refers to an inheritance that has been lost to the owner. It's still out there, but it's no longer functioning in the house. This is why the sheep imagery is so vital. If a shepherd has 100 sheep, Jesus talked about this too, and one goes missing, that sheep doesn't stop being his. Its status has changed from present to lost, but its identity hasn't changed at all. To understand who Yeshua is looking for, we have to look at the old case files. About 700 years before Yeshua, the prophet Ezekiel filed a massive indictment against the shepherds of Israel. And this is who Jesus is addressing. This is what Ezekiel said. The disease have you not strengthened, neither have you sought that which was lost. Jesus is using Ezekiel's exact terminology. He's stepping into a 700-year-old case. And when he said, I am the good shepherd, he's telling the Pharisees, you abandoned the files. You left the sheep in the ruins, but I'm here to close the case. Now we arrive at the most difficult piece of evidence in this entire file. Matthew 15, the Canaanite woman. If Jesus is the good shepherd looking for his sheep, why does he treat this woman with such cold, calculated silences? Let's read that. Matthew chapter 15, and we're going to start at verse 22. It says, Behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil. But he answered her not a word, and his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she cries after us. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's the context of this story. While he's out ministering, this woman hears his teaching. She's touched by his words. Her faith is rekindled. Watch the interrogation. She cries out, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David." Now stop right there. She uses a messianic title, Son of David. She's speaking the language of the house of Israel. But Yeshua doesn't answer her a word. The disciples are kind of encouraging him to send her away. They kind of see her as an intruder. Then Jesus speaks the words that are under investigation. I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, on the surface, this may sound like rejection, but in the context of this investigation, it's a jurisdictional statement. He is defining the scope of his legal mission. Let me say that again. Yeshua is defining the scope of his legal mission. But here's the breakthrough. The woman doesn't back down. No, she doesn't. She kneels, she says, "Lord, help me." And Jesus again responds with that famous line about not giving the children's bread to the dogs. Again, it sounds harsh, but in the Greek, he uses the word kynarion, which means small household dogs. He's not calling her a scavenger. He's describing the order of the household. And then she solves the case for us. She says, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table." She's not claiming to be one of the lost sheep. She's claiming that if the shepherd is in the house, now get this, the entire house benefits. She recognizes that Jesus's mission to only the house of Israel wasn't about exclusion, it was about restoration. If the lost sheep are found and the house is rebuilt, there's enough bread for the whole world. Oh, that we could understand that today, because many people who are waking up to their identity as Israel are and have become very exclusionary, and that is not the nature of the mission of Yah. He has a very specific mission for Israel to reach the nations of the world. Jesus calls her faith great because she saw the case file clearer than his own disciples did. Isn't it amazing that oftentimes people outside of the household of faith can see Yah's actions and grace and mercy clearer than those who claim to be his? Yeshua heals her daughter instantly, proving that while his mission was specific, his mercy is universal. Now, before we deliver the final verdict on the case, let's look at the trail that we've uncovered. First, we found the code of repetition. Jesus just didn't mention lost sheep once. He gave it as a direct order to his disciples, and then he confirmed it as his own personal mission. This wasn't a figure of speech, it's a job description. Then We cross-reference the missing persons report. By calling himself the Good Shepherd and mentioning other sheep, Jesus wasn't starting something new. He was bringing to completion something old. He was stepping into the cold case that had been filed by the prophet Ezekiel, a 700-year-old promise that the scattered house of Israel would one day be recovered. Powerful. Then in Exhibit D, we looked at the legal definition of apollyami. We discovered that being lost didn't mean they were gone. It meant they were rendered useless for their original purpose. They were a broken inheritance that needed a redeemer to buy them back. Finally, Exhibit E, the Canaanite contradiction, the woman who shouldn't have been helped, but was. It's through her that we discovered the most vital clue of all, that Jesus's mission, Yeshua's mission, was focused on only the lost sheep, not to keep others out, but to bring the bread of life back to the table so the entire world could finally eat. Every piece of evidence, the Greek words, the ancient prophecies, the miracles, points to one inescapable conclusion. Jesus, Yeshua, knew exactly who he was looking for. He knew exactly where they were, hidden among the nations, and he knew that finding them was the key to the salvation of the world. So this brings us back to the woman who wasn't a part of Israel. When she cried out for help and Yeshua brought up the lost sheep rule, she didn't argue. She persisted. Why? Because she recognized that even the crumbs from the master's table belong to the same house. The mystery of the lost sheep isn't about who Jesus, Yeshua, excludes. It's about who he's tracking. He said he was sent only to Israel because Israel was much larger and much more lost than anyone in that day actually realized. The file is open. But to find out who these sheep actually were and are, we have to look at the prophetic map. And that leads us directly to case file number 2. Until next time, keep investigating because the evidence is clear.